بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل؟ ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. صدق الله العظيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم بارك لنا ولشيخنا ولمشايخنا ولجميع المسلمين والحاضرين. أما بعد، فبأسانيدكم شيخنا حفظكم الله تعالى إلى الإمام أحمد بن محمد النسائي قال: باب ابتداء الوضوء. قال: أخبرنا محمد بن الحسن قال: أخبرنا مالك بن أنس قال: حدثنا عمرو بن يحيى بن عمارة بن أبي
أحمد بن He's the one who said باب ابتداء الوضوء. Say إلى الإمام محمد الحسن, and then the hadith start with أخبرنا مالك.
إلى الإمام محمد بن الحسن الشيباني رحمه الله تعالى قال: أخبرنا مالك بن أنس قال: حدثنا عمرو بن يحيى بن عمارة بن أبي حسن المازني عن أبيه يحيى أنه سمع جده أبا حسن يسأل عبد الله بن زيد بن عاصم، وكان من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، فقال: هل تستطيع أن تريني كيف كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يتوضأ؟ قال عبد الله بن زيد: نعم. فدعا بوضوء فأفرغ على يديه فغسل يديه مرتين، ثم مضمض، ثم غسل وجهه ثلاثا، ثم غسل يديه إلى المرفقين مرتين، ثم مسح من مقدم رأسه حتى ذهب بهما إلى قفاه، ثم ردهما إلى المكان الذي بدأ منه، ثم غسل رجليه. قال محمد: هذا حسن. والوضوء ثلاثا أفضل الوضوء، والاثنان يجزيان، والواحدة إذا أسبغت تجزئ أيضا، وهو قول أبي حنيفة.
نعم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we had reached the part where he said, قال عبد الله بن زيد: نعم. فدعا بوضوء فأفرغ على يديه فغسل يديه مرتين. هكذا. نعم. He says فغسل يديه. So Abdullah ibn Zayd radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he says, yes, I will show you how the Messenger ﷺ used to make wudu. And we mentioned that in one narration, or in some versions of this narration, he actually adds the addition where he mentions that the Messenger himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came to us and he called for water, and then he showed us how to make wudu. He showed us how to make wudu. So Abdullah ibn Zayd did the exact same thing. He says he calls for water. He asks for some water to be brought. And then he takes this water and he pours it over his two hands. And we mentioned in another version, it's mentioned explicitly that he took it with the right hand, or he took it with the left hand, the utensil, and poured the water onto his right hand and washed it 3 times. And then he washed both of his hands. Like he says over here, فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ مَرَّتَيْن. فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ مَرَّتَيْن. Okay, there's 2 times that ghusl yadayn or ghasl yadayn is mentioned in this narration. In the beginning, right in the beginning. The second time is after washing the face. ثم غسل يديه إلى المرفقين مرتين. Like when it comes to the first ghasl, washing of the hands, over here it says غسل يديه مرتين, that he washed his hands twice. Like this narration from Abdullah ibn Zayd has been transmitted from a number of narrators. Or this narration that goes back to Abdullah ibn Zayd has been transmitted with a number of chains. Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, this wording, which is فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ مَرَّتَيْن, over here in the first washing of the hands, this is specific to Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Malik, all of the narrators that narrated this hadith from Imam Malik, over here they said what? فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ مَرَّتَيْن. From them is Yahya al-Laythi in his version of the Muwatta. From them is the riwayah of Abdullah ibn Wahb, which is found in the Al-Mudawwana. And from them is the riwayah of Abu Mus'ab al-Zuhri. And from them is this riwayah of Muhammad Hassan al-Shaybani. And from them is Al-Imam al-Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala in Al-Um. And from them is Abdullah ibn Yusuf, also which is mentioned in Bukhari. And from them is Abdurrahman ibn al-Qasim, which is mentioned in Sunan al-Nasa'i. And from them is Utbah ibn Abdullah, which is also mentioned in Sunan al-Nasa'i. All of them mention marratain, twice over here. At the initial time, the first time he took the utensil and he poured it over his hands, he only washed the hands how many times? Twice. However, now all of them are narrating from Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. And Imam Malik narrates this narration from who? Amr ibn Yahya. Like, is Imam Malik the only one who narrates this from Amr ibn Yahya? The answer is no. The answer is no. And that's why Imam al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, when he mentioned this narration in Bukhari, right after this narration, he said, or Imam Bukhari brought the version of this hadith from other than Malik, meaning that from the same teacher of Imam Malik, who is Amr ibn Yahya, but not through Malik, rather through another sheikh. The rest of the ones that narrate this hadith from Amr ibn Yahya, over here they say فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا, not marratain. Marratain means twice, and thalathan means 3 times. The rest of them say over here how many times? 3 times. This is the riwayah of Al-Wuhayb, that is mentioned in Bukhari right after he brought the version of Malik. Malik an Amr ibn Yahya, فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ مرتين. The riwayah of Wuhayb an Amr ibn Yahya, the wording is فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا. Likewise, the riwayah of Khalid bin Abdullah, which is in Sahih Muslim, also فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا. And likewise, the riwayah of Darawardi, which is in the Mustakhraj of Abu Nu'aym, also with the wording فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا. So all of them are saying فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا. It's only Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala that said فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ مرتين. In this initial mentioning, meaning the first time the washing of the hands occurred, in the beginning of wudu. So we say over here, this is also an illah. This is an illah. Yani the correct wording, what is mahfuz over here is فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا and not مرتين. And so Amr ibn Yahya is the teacher. He has 4 students narrating this hadith from him. One of them is Malik. He says washing the hands twice. The other 3, Wuhayb and Khalid bin Abdullah, that these narrations are also in Bukhari and Muslim. And then you have Darawardi. The rest of them are all narrating how many times? Over here, فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا. And this is also indicating towards what we mentioned in the last lesson, that there is a lot of likelihood that there is a degree of ittirab in this hadith from Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. Okay? Now, there are the second timing of the washing of the hands is also, it also mentions over there he washed it twice. So again, there's 2 times that the washing of the hands are mentioned. Once is in the beginning when you first start your wudu, and then is after you initially wash your hands, then it will come that you gargle water and you blow your nose as well, and then you wash your face, and then you wash your hands till your elbows again. The second washing of the hands, all of the narrators agree, including Imam Malik, that it was only twice. We're talking about the first washing of the hands. So this illah is not in the second one. The second one, the wording over here is correct. ثم غسل وجهه ثلاثا ثم غسل يديه إلى المرفقين مرتين. That is correct. That is in line with everyone else. But the first washing of the hands, it also says over here فغسل يديه مرتين. And that is the way Imam Malik transmitted it, and that's what you're going to find from all of the students of Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. However, we said al-mahfuz over here, what is more likely over here is that the rest of the students of Amr ibn Yahya, they are the ones that remembered it correctly, and it's فغسل يديه ثلاثا in the beginning, the initial washing. واضح. طيب, over here, Al-Aini rahimahullah ta'ala presented something interesting, or he posed a question, which is that, is it possible over here that we can say this was in 2 separate instances? Imam Malik is an imam. Imam Malik is thiqa. He's trustworthy. He's a great imam. So is it possible this could actually be 2 separate incidents? In one incident, Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, for example, he washed, or is in line with what Imam Malik mentioned. So actually, Abdullah ibn Zayd, this actually occurred twice with Abdullah ibn Zayd. So Amr ibn Yahya himself narrated it 2 separate ways. And he heard it from his father 2 separate ways. And he heard it from the initial Abdullah ibn Zayd. And when it actually occurred, it occurred in 2 separate ways. And one time Abdullah ibn Zayd washed his hand twice. And one time he washed his hand once. So we say over here, this is ba'id. In this scenario, this is very, very unlikely. Why? Because the makhraj of the hadith is one. The madar over here is Amr ibn Yahya. The madar over here is Amr ibn Yahya. And Amr ibn Yahya is narrating from his father Yahya. And Yahya is narrating from his grandfather or his uncle, Amr ibn Abi Hassan, as we mentioned in the last lesson. And since the madar is one, okay, it's very unlikely that there are two separate incidents that occurred. Yes, if you had other students of Abdullah ibn Zayd transmitting this hadith, not through this chain, other students of Abdullah ibn Zayd, radiallahu anhu, the actual companion, that were transmitting how he made wudu, then over there you could say it's possible there were multiple incidents. Maybe one time he did this way, one time he did it this way. But when the khilaf is not occurring anywhere in the chain other than on the third level, like, okay, so for example, if we mention that Omer or Amr ibn Abi Hassan is the one who actually transmitted it to Yahya and he transmitted to Amr, and then Imam Malik takes from him. So the khilaf is occurring where? In the students of Amr. That is 3 generations after. If the khilaf is only occurring 3 generations after and nowhere up in between, then it's very difficult for you to claim that it was 2 separate incidents. When can you claim it's 2 separate incidents? When the khilaf occurs in the immediate students of the Sahabi. So if it's one Sahabi and immediate students of that Sahabi are narrating in different ways, then it's possible it could have been multiple incidents. But that's not what's happening over here. Okay? That's why he said, Al-Aini said, Al-Makhraj wahid wal-asl adamu ta'addud. And this is also really important. This is a big difference between the approach of the muhaddithin and the approach of the fuqaha. Remember this is golden. A very big difference between the approach of the muhaddithin and the approach of the fuqaha. The approach of the muhaddithin, there is one premise that underlines their entire outlook. And that is that the default is that the narration is always narrated one way. Not that the narration from the very get-go can be narrated in multiple ways. The default is that one way is correct, and if there are variances, most likely they're going to try and make sure or try and figure out which one is correct and which one is wrong. So the default is عدم التعدد عند المحدثين. Not that the same thing can be narrated in so many different ways and it's possible, yani based on jawaz aqlan. Okay. Whereas the usuliyun and the fuqaha, because the usuliyun approach more from a logical perspective, and likewise the fuqaha, their approach is more of a logical perspective. They say, is it logically possible that there could be multiple incidents? The answer is yes. So as long as it's logically possible that there could be multiple incidents, why would you go and claim that there was a rawi who is supposed to be trustworthy, a narrator that's supposed to be trustworthy, and place the mistake upon him, place the blame upon him? Why can't you just say that, okay, there was multiple incidents and some narrated this way and some narrated this way, and they're both fine? And is it permissible, is it logically a contradiction that Abdullah ibn Zayd himself could have done it both ways, and then that could have been transmitted in each generation both ways? And then Amr ibn Yahya, he happened to only transmit it in this manner to Imam Malik and in the other manner to the rest of the students. Is that possible logically? Answer is yes. There's no logical contradiction. It's unlikely, but is it possible? The answer is yes. So as long as it's possible, why would you claim that there's a rawi that's making a mistake? And that's why, if you remember, for those that studied Mustalah, when we went through Nukhbatul Fikr, we mentioned that Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, he mentioned a really important point when we were speaking about the conditions of the hadith which is authentic. And we mentioned that according to Muhaddithun, there shouldn't be an illah in the hadith, a hidden defect in the hadith, because that would render it as being non-authentic. And over there, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, he said the majority of what the Muhaddithun will consider an illah in a hadith, the usuliyun and the fuqaha don't consider them ilal. They just say it's possible it was narrated both ways. What's the problem? That's just their approach. Whereas the muhaddithun will claim, okay, that's an illah, and that would render the hadith problematic. So based on what we see happening in this narration, like the zahir of this narration, there's a bunch of red lights, caution flags. Like, okay, wait, why is it being narrated in so many different ways? And there's multiple places where this, and from a muhaddith perspective, based on what we so far finished regarding this narration, most likely Imam Malik did not memorize this narration to that level, and it's possible that there are certain mistakes that were made even from him, even though he's such a great imam. And that's possible. This is the reality of how ahadith are spread. So, as in an imam, a great imam, even if he's a great muhaddith, can still make a mistake, because they're human beings at the end of the day. And the way we are able to determine what is the most correct and most authentic version is by cross-comparing with all of the other variances and the other chains. This is the approach of the muhaddithun. And the approach of the fuqaha is very different. 9 out of 10 times the fuqaha will be like, okay, what's the problem? فغسل يديه مرتين فغسل يديه ثلاثا. Well, what are they going to say? They're going to say that ذكر الأقل لا ينافي ذكر الأكثر. And when you mention that which is lesser in number, that doesn't negate that which is more in number. For example, there's a virtue that's mentioned. If you do so and so, you will get 50 reward. For example, in salah, if you pray salah with jama'ah, you get how many rewards? In some hadith, 25 rewards. 25 times the reward of praying it by yourself. In some narrations, 27 times the reward of praying it by yourself. The muhaddith thinks, okay, this doesn't make any sense. The default is one way. It's either 25 or 27. The faqih's approach is, okay, both could be true. Because when you mention 25, that doesn't mean that more could not be possible. So they have a big asal which they mention. ذكر الأقل لا ينافي ذكر الأكثر. Or لا ينافي الأكثر. Just because you mention what's lesser, you say 3 students walk in. Does that mean 5 students could not have walked in after those 3 students? And in total you had 8 students? Of course, just because you mentioned 3 students came, or if I say, for example, there are 5 students sitting in front of me. Does that mean there's only 5 and there couldn't be more students? What if I intended 5 actual students sitting in front of me? So it could be possible that there could be intent of more as well. So simply mentioning the number which is lesser does not negate the possibility of more. And this is very common. If you look into the books of the Usuli and the Fuqaha, they mention this all the time. But according to the Muhaddithun, this is all, it doesn't add up. Why? Because the underlying premise that governs their outlook is that the default is everything is supposed to be one way. It shouldn't be multiple ways. There shouldn't be multiple ways that hadith are being transmitted. They should be transmitted one way, because this is simply ikhbar. Ikhbar is relaying information. And everyone relays based on what they understood or what they comprehended. Now, so this is really important as you study these things. Of course, one is to study usul al-fiqh, and then you study usul al-hadith. After you study these 2 disciplines, then you apply it where? In the books of hadith. You look at the same hadith from the perspective of usuliyun, and you look at the same hadith from the perspective of muhaddithun, so you can understand why they differ in the end. When the ulama arrive at different conclusions, there's a reason why they arrive at different conclusions, because their approach a lot of times is different. Their outlook is different. Okay? But the only way you'll be able to do this is you have to master the alat. Alat meaning the tools that are required, the prerequisites that are required to actually be able to understand these different outlooks. And those are 2, usul al-hadith and usul al-fiqh. The discipline of legal theory and the discipline of usul al-hadith. Both of them, when you understand them, and you have to study both together. You can't study one and leave the other. If you only study one method, you will think that is the only way of determining what's right and what's wrong. And usually people that only study one method, they usually results in a degree of ta'assub. And that ta'assub is madhmoom. And they think my way or the highway. What I understand is the way it's supposed to be, and everything else is incorrect. Okay, so if you study only usul al-hadith, you're going to think whatever the muhaddithun considers sahih, that is the way it is, and everything else is out the window. And, even from the muhaddith perspective, Imam Bukhari mentioned this narration of Imam Malik in sahih. Why did Imam Bukhari mention it? Even from the muhaddith perspective, there are so many more things and nuances and details that you can extract from these. Maybe Imam Bukhari didn't think this is really that big of a deal, and therefore he brought it in Sahih. واضح? Or maybe he was trying to give ishara towards certain things. Check the exact wording. Of 183 or 185. فغسل يديه. نعم. So all of this is to be kept in mind. طيب. Now we mentioned that according to the actual wording of the muhaddithun, or the actual wording of or the actual understanding of the muhaddithun, we can't consider this to be 2 separate scenarios or 2 separate incidents. Very unlikely. Like, now, over here there's a mas'ala fiqhiyya, which is when you make wudu, washing the hands before you start your wudu, what is the hukum of that? It's mentioned over here. فَغَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ ثَلَاثًا, which we're saying is mahfuz. مرتين in Bukhari as well. With the riwayah of who? نعم, Imam Malik. So Imam Bukhari was willing to bring the wording which is مرتين in his Sahih. And then the one right after that. Gonna say ثلاثا. The one right after that said ثلاثا. Like, so we mentioned, if you remember a week or two ago, I said Imam Bukhari gives ishara towards ilal in Sahih. The brother who asked the question, he's not here today. Like, Imam Bukhari gives ishara towards ilal in Sahih. Okay, he brought one hadith and it says marratain, and right after that he brings the other one which says salatan. What's he telling you? And that first one also said anna rajulan did ibham of it. The second one did ta'yin of it. Okay, so these are isharat. And clearly he understood what he was doing. And Bukhari knew exactly what he was doing. Rahimahullah ta'ala. So in his Sahih we mentioned, in fact, when you guys study Bukhari, you should be going through this. All of the places where Imam Bukhari gives ishara towards ilal in his Sahih. Last time we studied it, we went through so many and we found so many places. I created an entire document on this. Just examples upon examples of where he's giving ishara towards ilal in his Sahih. By bringing the wording itself, he brings the wording which is ma'lul. But is it that big of a deal? No, it's not. But this is, a very, meaning he, as a muhaddith, he is giving that indication in the wording that he brings as well. These are nuances. So people, they a lot of them, when they don't understand the intricacies which are found within the science and discipline, they carry slogans and they attach themselves to the general ideas, and they don't understand that it's a very detailed science. Not as simple as every single thing in Bukhari is Sahih, every single thing in Muslim is Sahih. That's a very amateur way of looking at these things. Okay, every single thing is Sahih in Bukhari the way Imam Bukhari wants it to be, or the way he's trying to portray it, not the way you understand it. Okay, and if Imam Bukhari is purposely bringing a narration to tell you right after that the more correct version of that narration, then that should make us understand that the first narration is not as authentic or equally as authentic as the second one, because which one's right at the end of the day? Okay, so and there's so many examples like this. So it's a very amateur way to look at it, to claim that every single thing in Bukhari is Sahih. That question is wrong. The question itself is incorrect. Question itself, is every single hadith in Bukhari Sahih or not? That question itself is incorrect. The correct way of understanding this is that Imam Bukhari is telling you what's authentic, but sometimes at the same time he's willing to bring things to show that the way you're supposed to understand this, or the way you should understand this, is based on what comes next. And he brings both in his Sahih to elaborate on that or to express that. Now, so now the mas'ala becomes, or the mas'ala we're talking about is that what is the hukum of washing the hands before making wudu? What is the hukum of washing the hands before making wudu? Like, this actual idea or the concept of washing the hands before making wudu, it actually comes from another hadith. It actually comes from another hadith. And what is that hadith? That hadith is through the riwayah of Abu Zinad al-A'raj an Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فليغسل يده قبل أن يدخلها في وضوئه فإن أحدكم لا يدري أين باتت يده. That whenever one of you wakes up from his sleep, he should wash his hands before he enters his hand into the utensil that he's using. فإنه لا يدري, because that individual does not know where his hand was at night. And what does this mean? It's possible that when a person is sleeping, for example, that he is not, and one of the reasons we mentioned as to the reason why sleep breaks the wudu, whereas in reality it's not the sleep which is actually breaking the wudu, it's the passing of wind which is actually breaking the wudu. But when a person is asleep, he's not aware, he has no idea, and usually what happens is that the limbs, they become soft, or they become loose, and they're also resting. So he is not aware, and at times it's very likely that he will pass gas unknowingly. Over here we said iqamatu sabab maqam al-musabab. The means that will lead to something, they consider that the result itself. They give it the same hukum as the result. The result is that the wudu breaks when the passing of the wind occurs. The sleep is a means towards that, and they said the sleep over here because there's no way for us to figure out whether that actually happens or not. Okay, so the sabab over here, the sabab is something which is khafi, and where there's no way for us to figure out whether the passing of the wind happens while a person is sleeping or not. So therefore, when the sabab becomes khafi and it becomes something which is more likely, sabab is khafi and is ghalib, then in that situation, aqamu sabab maqam al-musabbab. Now, so they gave it the same hukum as the result, which normally would be to pass the wind, which is the breaking of wudu. So the same hukum applies to the sleeping, which is that if you sleep in a state where your limbs, that's why, for example, if a person sleeps in a state where the limbs are very rigid and intact, and they gave an example of this of the arkan of salah. For example, if someone goes into ruku and he falls asleep in ruku, right? Or he goes into sajda and he falls asleep in sajda. And he remains in the position of sajda properly. But then he wakes up. In order for him to remain in that position properly, his muscles, his joints had to be intact. They couldn't have been loose. They had to be intact. So they mention over there that in certain positions in salah, if a person were to fall asleep, his wudu won't break. Or even when a person, for example, if a person is sitting down and he's not leaning against something, he's just sitting down normally. And if he were to fall asleep and then he wakes up, the wudu doesn't break because his joints remain intact in order for him to remain upright. Someone is standing and he falls asleep and he remains standing. That means clearly his muscles are still intact and he doesn't fall down. Muscles are still intact. As opposed to someone who's leaning against the wall, for example, and he's sleeping. If you were to remove that thing he's leaning against, he'll fall down. So it shows you that his muscles are not intact while he's leaning and while he's sleeping. Now, so they differentiated between these two scenarios. The whole point of mentioning this is because we say that when a person is sleeping, he's not aware of what happens. And the same way wind can be passed at a time when a person sleeps, it's possible some najasa also exits the body when a person is sleeping. And a person would not notice. If this were to occur, and also another reason for this is that when a person sleeps, usually people when they sleep, they sweat. When a person sweats, it's possible that if there was najasa which was dry, and we didn't mention this over here, but you've probably studied this in the books of fiqh, that back in the days, a'azakumullah, the istinja that was done, not everyone had access to water. Water was scarce. And so the Sharia did not mandate that at the time of istinja, after a person relieves himself, he has to use water. That wasn't mandation. That wasn't mandated. That wasn't an obligation. So what was commanded? That he should use, for example, certain small rocks or stones to clean himself. Very specific type, right? The Messenger said, "I'tini bi thalathati ahjar," 3 rocks. And when they would do istinja with that, if you don't use water in your istinja, and you simply, even today, for example, if someone would simply wipe using toilet paper, even though toilet paper is probably more, is better and it's more useful than, for example, using rocks or stones. But if someone were to only use toilet paper and not water, it's possible that some najasa would still be dry and it would remain on the body, even after istinja is done. And that's why, according to the Ahnaf, if there's najasa ghalila which is lesser than the size of a dirham, that is ma'fu an. It's forgiven. Because it would be shadid haraj. It would cause a lot of difficulty if we were to command that you can have absolute zero najasa on the body. It's something people are not aware of sometimes. And sometimes it's haraj to remove it unless you have water. And it's not necessary in all moments in time that people have access to water the way we have access to water today. So for this reason, Sharia did not mandate the usage of water. Yes, it was highly recommended. And regarding that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the verse, فِيهِ رِجَالٌ يُحِبُّونَ أَن يَتَطَهَّرُوا. One opinion is that this verse was revealed regarding individuals that used to use both water and ahjar for the purpose of istinja, cleaning themselves after they relieve themselves. So the Sharia mandated not the usage of water. Rather, the Sharia commanded that the istinja should be done. And the ulama, the fuqaha, they mentioned that if the najasa ghalila, even though it's very severe amounts of impurity, like for example, azakumullah, urination, or gha'it and bawl, even that, if it's lesser than 1 dirham, then it's ma'fu an. And the reason for this is because it would result in shadid haraj if it was not the case. Meaning if Sharia commanded that everything has to be removed 100%. So now, when a person is asleep, let's say for example, sometimes a person might have a degree a little bit and he doesn't even notice of najasa on his body, anywhere. And because of the sweat, that najasa, it becomes wet. And now he doesn't know where his hands are as well in his sleep. And he doesn't know how he's sleeping or how he's moving or how he's turning left and right. It's possible, it's not necessary, it's possible that the hand could touch something which is najis and it could also have najasa on it. So now when you're going to make wudu, if the utensil, for example, is the way the utensils were, is that the opening would be large enough for you to put your hand inside. So technically you would put your hand inside, both hands. This is called gharfa in Arabic. And you would take a scoop of water and then you would make wudu with that. And that's the utensil used to have a large opening for you to put the water. But if the hand is najis and you place your hand inside the water, what's going to happen? The water is ma qalil or kathir. It's less water, therefore it's going to become najis as well. The moment if the water is of such less amount, any drop of najasa in that water will make the entire water impure. Okay. So the hukum over here was the messenger said, when one of you wake up from his sleep, فَلْيَغْسِلْ يَدَهُ قَبْلَ أَن يُدْخِلَهَا فِي وَضُوئِهِ. فَلْيَغْسِل over here is صيغة الأمر. فَلْيَغْسِل, this lam is lam al-amr. It's a lam that comes from mandation. You studied in usul al-fiqh that the lam that comes from mandation, the asl, the default in it is that it is lil wujub. It's for mandation. When the صيغة الأمر is used, the default is that it's for mandation unless you have a qarina, unless you have a hint that would suggest otherwise. Over here, فَلْيَغْسِلْ يَدَهُ is mentioned. And the reason is the same reason, if you think about it. What is the reason the messenger is saying this, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? The same reason, which is إقامة السبب مقام المسبب. When we said when you sleep, استرخاء المفاصل happens, the joints to become loose. And that is the sabab for the passing of wind. We don't know if the passing of wind occurs or not, so we said the sabab, and it's makhfi. Whether that was found or not, it's something we can't access, we don't have information of. Therefore, we said the sabab over here is qa'im maqama al-musabab. The hukum of the musabab is given to the sabab. The same thing over here, which is that did his hand pass upon something which is najis, impure or not? We don't know. Is there any way for you to find out? Answer is no. Therefore, the same hukum should apply. The same way Sharia says that wudu is mandatory and necessary after you sleep. The same way washing the hands after you wake up, before you actually enter them into the utensil, should be a mandation. It should be fard. The same exact logic. The same asl is being applied. However, the ulama, they differed regarding this. And this is just to show you over here, you're going to see the beauty of usul al-fiqh, inshallah ta'ala, and the beauty of the understanding or being exposed to the intricacies and the details of how the fuqaha think. So number one, we mentioned the narration. We said according to qiyas, and if you apply the same asl, which is iqamatu sabab maqam al-musabab over here, then the washing of the hands before you place the hands in the utensil should also be wajib and a mandation, the same way making wudu is a mandation after you wake up from sleep. However, that is not the case according to the majority of the ulama. And to summarize, the ulama, they have 5 opinions in this regard. 5 opinions when it comes to this scenario, which is washing the hands before wudu. The first opinion is that the one who has doubt of whether his hand is tahir or not, it's mustahab for him. Not wajib, it's mustahab. This opinion has been transmitted from Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, the second opinion is that it is sunnah. And this is the opinion adopted by the Hanafiya, the mashhur opinion of the Hanafiya, meaning the washing the hands before you start your wudu, it is sunnah. Okay. The third opinion is that the person who wakes up from sleep, but only the sleep of the night, not the sleep if he sleeps during the day, no. Only if he sleeps at nighttime. Upon him, it's wajib. The one who wakes up from sleep at nighttime, upon him, it's wajib. Like all of these ahkam today, technically, because we use taps, right? So you would go and you just open the tap and you wash the hands. This hukum wouldn't apply anymore, even according to this opinion. The opinion is not applying it in the sense that the idea over here is that before you enter your hands into the utensil, unless they make it an amr ta'budi, which is really interesting. Look this up. The Hanabila, are they applying this even today? The wujub, because this is the opinion of the Hanabila. Imam Ahmad says this. وَيَجِبُ غَسْلُهُمَا ثَلَاثًا بِنِيَّةٍ وَتَسْمِيَةٍ مِّن نَوْمِ لَيْلٍ نَاقِضًا لِوُضُوء. Okay, this is mentioned in Ar-Rawd al-Murbi'. Look it up. The modern scholars of the Hanabila, do they also say that this applies even after you're using tap water? Like, for example, just opening the tap. Would it still be necessary? It's possible. يعني له وجه أيضا. نعم. So what is the hukum? That it is wajib upon the one who wakes up from after he slept during the night, as opposed to the one who slept during the day. Like, why the difference between sleeping during the night and sleeping during the day? Because when you sleep during the day, you're only sleeping for what? 30 minutes, 1 hour maximum. Qaylula is not long. It's not meant to be long. So it's not a long sleep. It's not long enough that most likely, a person would enter into his deep sleep and he wouldn't be self-aware and so on. It's a quick sleep, as opposed to the sleep that occurs at nighttime, because that is when a person sleeps and he has a deep sleep. طيب. That was the third opinion. The fourth opinion, that the one who has shak Okay? The one who has shak, it's wajib upon him. And this is the mashhur opinion of Imam Malik. The first opinion was the one that who has shak, it's mustahab for him. That was a riwayah from Malik. The second opinion is that the one who has shak, he's doubtful whether there's najasa on his hand or not. For him, it is wajib. This is the mashhur opinion of the madhab of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala. The fifth opinion is that anyone who wakes up from sleep, whether it's during the day or during the night, okay, upon him it is wajib that he has to wash the hands before making wudu. طيب. Okay, so now based on the hadith that we mentioned, that was إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فليغسل يده قبل أن يدخلها في وضوئه فإن أحدكم لا يدري أين باتت يده. We said صيغة الأمر, the asl is that it's for wujub, which is a mandation. And over here, the qiyas is that it should become wajib. Because the same idea, إقامة السبب مقام المسبب. So now you have to answer from two perspectives. Number one, where is the qarina? Two usuli reasons are causing you to make it mandatory. Majority of ulama don't make this a mandation. Why? The Ahnaf don't make it a mandation. Likewise, the majority of Ahlul Ilm don't make it a mandation al itlaq. Why is that the case? We say number one, when it comes to صيغة الأمر, when it comes to صيغة الأمر, صيغة الأمر is for wujub. That is correct. And the beginning of the hadith indicates upon mandation. However, the end of the hadith tells us that what's intended is not mandation. The same hadith. And what is it? إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فليغسل يده قبل أن يدخلها في وضوئه. What's the next line? فإن أحدكم لا يدري أين باتت يده. This fa is for ta'leel. The messenger is telling you why the hukum is mentioned. The messenger is telling you why the hukum is mentioned. He says, because one of you don't know where your hand slept at night or where your hand was while you were sleeping. Okay. The messenger did ta'liq of the hukum upon something which is unknown. And he علق الحكم بأمر مشكوك فيه. He did ta'liq of the hukum with a matter which has doubt. And anytime you do ta'liq of the hukum with a matter which is doubtful, that is to show you that the hukum is not for wujub, rather it's for sunniyah. Naam. So the first part of the hadith would indicate wujub, and the end part of the narration would indicate sunniyah. نعم. الخطابي, he says الأمر فيه أمر استحباب لا أمر إيجاب وذلك لأنه قد علقه بالشك والأمر المضمن بالشك لا يكون واجبا وأصل الماء الطهارة وكذلك بدن الإنسان وإذا ثبتت. نعم. So this was the first point. So to reply to the first usuli qaida, which was al-amru lil-wujub, and why are we not applying that? We say over here that amr is mu'allaq with an amr which is mashkuk fi, and that removes the idea that the amr over here, the sayyatul amr, initially was for wujub, for mandation. Like the second asl, which is iqamatu sabab maqam al-musabbab. We see over here in reality, there are two usuli qawaid that are going against. نعم. So we said that there's two qawaid fiqhiyah over here that are contradicting. Number one is al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak. Number two is iqamatu sabab maqam al-musabbab. The first one is al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak. When you have certainty upon something, then doubt cannot remove it. The second one is iqamatu sabab maqam al-musabbab. When you go to sleep, let's say before you sleep, you are in the state of tahara. There's doubt whether you passed wind or not. Going to the first qaida, which is al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak, you should remain in tahara after you wake up, because you don't have certainty that you passed wind. And al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak. According to the second qaida, iqamatu sabab maqam al-musabbab, you should have to remake wudu. Okay. In one scenario, they apply the qaida of al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak, which is فَإِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ. In the second scenario, they apply the qaida of iqamatu sabab maqam al-musabbab. Why? We'll talk about this inshallah bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, the next lesson. And maybe you can search it up. Allah ta'ala. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.